Welcome to another episode of the Battlefields Bourbon Podcast. I'm Jack, joined as always by my co-host Elijah and reoccurring co-host Aaron Siever of Aaron Civil War Travels. We're coming to you live from the beautiful Bell House in historic downtown Winchester, Virginia, which is preserved by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, the managing body of the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District, the sponsor of the Battlefields Bourbon Podcast. We've got an exciting episode for you folks today, but first let's dive into our bourbon. Elijah, take it away.
So we've got a more easy to find bourbon this evening. We've got Bulleit or Bulleit, however you pronounce that. I'm sure we'll get corrected one way or the other.
Do people say it different ways?
Apparently it's actually Bulleit.
No.
Yeah, it's the EIT is Bulleit, but I call it Bulleit, and I think everyone else does too. Anyway, Bulleit bourbon, or as they call it, Frontier whiskey. This one, obviously, you can find it on any ABC store shelf, any liquor store across the country, really. So a good, easy one for everybody to find, everyone to enjoy as they listen to this episode. This one, as far as the mash bill is concerned, is 68% corn, 28% rye, 4% malted barley. They don't say who makes this. If you look at the label, it'll say bottled by the Bulleit Distilling Co in Louisville, Kentucky. Not that it's distilled by them. So they source their bourbon probably from MGP, as a lot of brands do. But this one is distilled, as they say, in the Bulleit or Bulleit family tradition. So it's basically they have, I guess, someone else distill that for them, a family recipe, something of that nature. But yeah, so this is a higher rye bourbon, being 28% rye. Definitely going to have some spice to it. Lower corn content, being in the 60% range. But yeah, we can give this one a little pop and see what it sounds like. I'm not...
Oof.
Yeah, that was weak. That was weak. That cork is very, very loose.
If you folks are listening,
it pours nice though,
and you didn't hear the pop, there's a reason. Because there wasn't a pop.
It's been open.
This bottle has been open, so we don't have a fresh bottle for you folks today, but we do our best to get those when we can. Everyone give her a nosing.
Definitely got that spiciness to it, you know, like a little cinnamon, like a red hot type of deal.
Really light.
Yeah, if you're sipping on some right now as you're listening to this, you can look in your glass and see this is a very light-hued whiskey. It's not aged for very long, if I had to guess. Probably 5-6 years. Oh, and I also forgot to mention the proof. This one is a 90 proof, 45% alcohol by volume. So one of your more standard octanes, if you will.
Let's give her a taste. Aaron has already tried it, by the way.
There's some interesting flavors in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that's going to wow you.
It's sweet. I mean...
Yeah.
It's a very mild burn, too, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not...
For that proof with that rye content,
what
the
proof
heat
is it
there,
again?
90. So it's basic.
Okay.
But that kind of lower proof, as opposed to us, you know, how we here lately have had 100, 120, 130 on the show. This one is a change of scenery. But the rye content paired with that proof, I think, is a good balance for the heat there. But it's...
I don't hate it. I was going thinking I wasn't going to like it as much, but...
Honestly, me too, yeah.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, you see things like... And it's more of a common thing to see, like Elijah was saying, in the ABC store. So you kind of get wondering, well, it's mass-produced. Is it going to be good? I don't think it was terrible.
Well, it's something, too, that you see at a lot of bars and restaurants.
So it's like...
That's
it
your
makes
typical
you,
mixer.
Yeah, it makes you not want to drink it. I mean, for me, me seeing it used so much makes me go, I'm going to shy away from a pour of that. I'd rather have a pour of, you know, if I'm at like a fancy bar, it'll be like, I'll have a pour of Blanton's or blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not going to go, give me a pour of Bulleit or Bulleit.
Your rail bourbon that you're putting in all your mixers and stuff. Yeah, I don't want a neat pour of that.
But with that said, you could sit down and by a campfire and have a drink of this.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Or you know, it's not unpleasing at all.
No, it would make a nice summertime bourbon, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a good mixer.
Like out in the field with, some buddies or something, and you guys are just, like you said, hanging around a campfire or,
I could see this with a bourbon sour, too. That'd be really good.
Yeah, that or an old fashioned for sure.
I've had this with a mint julep, and it wasn't good. So
I feel like the mint would probably throw off that profile a little bit.
Yeah.
Like the sweetness of a sour or an old fashioned, just that simple syrup, and they would probably give it a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, this has been a highly requested one for us to do, so we thought let's make it one of the first couple ones we do in the new year. So we brought it, dusted it off the shelves and brought it out for you folks today. And
now, to be fair, like we said, this has been opened. Hasn't had a lot poured out of it, maybe a quarter of the bottle to start, so it has had some oxygen to it. And
which has helped it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had Bulleit before to know what it would taste like, as just a fresh crack. So obviously there's a difference there. When a whiskey gets aerated like that, it's going to slightly alter the flavor profile. Nothing like too dramatic. It's not going to be like a totally different bourbon or anything like that. But I mean, it's definitely one of those ones that I was expecting to be let down by, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised, especially for something that's so, readily available and affordable, and something that some folks will give a mixed opinion on. But I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah, I was actually thinking this is something that if you're building a collection of bourbons, go ahead and grab yourself a bottle of Bulleit.
Don't be ashamed to have
Don't
that
be
one on your
ashamed to
shelf.
have it.
Yeah.
Bottle-wise, love the bottle. It's very iconic for this brand now. It's like you don't even have to see the label on it and it's Bulleit.
Like the 1860s style to it, too.
The stamp, the crooked stamp on the back. Or no, it's label. Does that label go all the way around?
Yeah.
It's crooked.
The embossing
it
on the
doesn't go all the
glass
way.
and everything.
It stops, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of crooked. It's very classic looking.
But that embossing and everything. And that, I guess, goes back to their family tradition. I was reading an article from Breaking Bourbon talking about, I guess, the modern-day founder or spokesman for Bulleit, I think his name's Tom Bulleit, said that their family recipe or distilling roots began back in like the 1830s. So that bottle kind of matches that era, that style. And obviously their high rye philosophy with their whiskey is kind of given a nod to the 19th century style where rye was more prevalent. But yeah, overall, good bourbon.
Yeah, there's something, and I've got another shot here.
It's a pour. Give yourself some dignity here.
I'm sorry,
Aaron.
it's a pour. I don't know. There's something I can't put my finger on it. It's not a bad thing. It's just I don't know. It's like an after spice. It's
Brown sugar.
I mean, I could almost say like a after sourness in a way. There's a sense of like, I think this often, but I don't say it, like a soap in your mouth kind of taste. Not like burning rubbing alcohol, but like a little bit of like the tongue soapiness. Not bad soap, like you curse and your mom put soap in your mouth, but like just the sense of like, that's not your typical sweet or dark. It's like I don't know.
Mild.
Yeah, it's something else, and the only thing I can relate it to is soap, which isn't good for one of the things you would list as a flavor, but I could see that in this. But it's definitely the first note I get hit with is the sweetness.
Yeah.
And when I said light, obviously color is very light. The age is probably not that long, but light in flavor too. It's not a whole bunch in your mouth at once. It's not a bunch of flavors you're getting hit with. It's pretty like cookie cutter. And what you're going to get as soon as you taste it. And then you might get that aftertaste that Aaron's talking about. And then that's it. That's the bourbon. Like it's a sip. It's maybe a couple seconds and boom, it's done. It's nothing that's going to stick around or
lack of complexity, but not in a bad way. It's an entry-level bourbon for a reason.
It makes it easy to if you have never had bourbon before, it's not a bad one to start with to, kind of get your palate used to what bourbon is.
Yeah, we had to build Jack up to the high proof stuff. Now look at him.
Yeah, look at me now. It's kind of crazy how fast I've transitioned in.
You've matured.
Matured, yeah, because we were just saying before we started recording, I found myself liking higher ryes, in a mash bill, or just rye whiskeys in general, over more wheated things or corn heavy things. So, yeah.
Which, to that point, Bulleit, whatever you'll call it, they do a rye whiskey as well, 95.5 rye.
Is that green label?
Yep, green label. Yeah. They also do a 10-year and a cask strength, and they do some like single barrel selections and stuff like that, and maybe a couple other more limited releases, maybe.
They got something. It's like a orange ball or whatever.
Oh, those are the pre-made cocktails. Yeah, it's like a pre-made old-fashioned.
Yeah, they've got those, and they're not terrible. For a pre-made cocktail, sometimes you kind of wonder about those. Those aren't. It kind of gives you that idea of the mixing that they do. Mm-hmm. It does mix well with things.
Yeah, I mean that's your standard rail bourbon that you'd see at a bar for mixing and shots or what have you.
But by itself, it's not actually.
Yeah.
It's not. It can hold its own, I think.
And that's what we're here for. We're here to sip it neat for you, so you don't have to go to a restaurant and use your one free pour on something like that. You can get something a little more.
Where are you
expensive.
getting free pours at?
That's what I want to know.
I can't tell you.
Oh, okay. Well, for you folks that are somehow knowing where Elijah gets free pours,
track me down.
Try what you can. Don't be afraid of Bulleit. That's how I've got to say. About half the bottle is left now in the first 11 minutes of this episode.
Thanks,
so we're getting there. And to be honest with you folks, we do have other bourbons at the table just in case, because we were worried. We were worried about Bulleit. Bulleit had this reputation with it that we all talked about beforehand. And we were pleasantly surprised. So shout out to Bulleit for not making a terrible bourbon, terrible whiskey. Aaron's on his 20th pour now, so we're feeling good.
He's going to take this bottle home, too.
Yeah.
So with this being Bulleit's bourbon, Bulleit Bourbon's frontier whiskey, let's head back out to the frontier.
The frontier.
See how I did
Arkansas.
that? The frontier. We'll head back out west for another Western theater, staying literally in the West. The Battle of Pea Ridge. Timeline-wise, we're not following too far off of what we talked about in our last episodes with the battles of Fort Henry and Fort Donelson and their capture. Still in the same time period. In the big picture, these things kind of all play together with how troops will react, how the Confederates will react because of wins they had early on in the war, as well as these pretty bad losses at the start of 1862. So with that, we're headed to right on the border of Arkansas and Missouri. So Aaron, let's talk about Pea Ridge.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about 62, the beginning of 62, like we have. Our last couple episodes that we've done together, we talked about the Romney campaign. We talked about Jackson out in Virginia making some moves, getting some things going out there. That's really the only the big Confederate moves are there. Until you get to this point. You've got the Federal Army just took Fort Henry and Donelson in February. We're now at March of 1862, and this is actually going to be a Confederate push, not a Union push, although it will in the end be a Union victory. This particular area, the troops that are here under Benjamin McCulloch have fought at the Battle of Wilson's Creek in 1861. So that second black eye that the Union Army got in the Civil War, almost back-to-back with Bull Run or Manassas. So these guys, they fought before. The problem is we got to look at the command structure that happens at the Confederacy in that Western theater. You have a guy named Sterling Price, who later will be in command of these troops and will lead a raid into Missouri in 1864. But you have him, you have Benjamin McCulloch, and neither one of those guys can get along with each other. McCulloch he's an old Texas Ranger. He was the sheriff of Sacramento County. He's fought in 3 wars. He's I think this is just kind of, he's never worn a uniform.
Yeah.
He fought in the Texas Army or Texas Republic Army. He fought in the Mexican-American War and now the Civil War. Not once has he donned a uniform because he hated them. So you kind of get an idea of who he is. This guy is
rough and tough.
He is your One of the guys described him as, that's your frontiersman there. That's what you look at and go, that's a mountain man. Then you've got Sterling Price, also a war veteran, a little more general-like as far as wants things done his way. And he and McCulloch do not see eye to eye. They argue constantly. They can't get on the same page, and that's going to lead to another person being brought out to the Western Theater and put in command of this area, which is Earl Van Doren. Van Doren, another veteran of war. He is probably the best cavalier in the whole U.S. Army at that time. He is one of the best cavaliers, if not the best, when the Civil War starts. He is noted for defending an Indian settlement against the Comanches. He rides rough and tough. He's definitely a guy that's respected at the time. But he's not great with infantry. So you're going to have these three personalities that are in the Confederacy. On the Union side, you've had some movement too. Franz Sigel, who we know from the Shenandoah Valley, and some other battles, Wilson's Creek and things like that, is going to be out there in the West. He's going to be in command for a little bit. You're going to have Henry Halleck in command. Now you have this guy, Samuel Curtis. Curtis, again, is another war veteran. He's also a politician. He was the first Republican congressman, I believe, from Missouri. So he's going to be the first one of the first Republican congressmen elected, and that's Samuel Curtis. And all these guys, the reason I'm kind of bringing them all up is they all have very similar lives before the Civil War. They're all military veterans. They fought in the same wars for the most part. And McCulloch, obviously, in 3 different wars. And so these Westerners, I feel like, have a little more experience than our Eastern guys. A lot of our Eastern guys, yes, did fight, but it's more, I don't know, I guess because every eye is on them, it's not as rough and tough.
Yeah.
Where this battle's going to be fought is up in the Ozarks. Like you said, the border of Missouri and Arkansas. And it's in March, and it's cold. It's nasty. So to set up really why we get to Pea Ridge, when Van Doren gets out to the west and is put in charge of this area, he is going to make a decision that he needs to attack the Union Army. He wants to get to St. Louis. He wants to press up, get Missouri into the Confederacy. They've tried it already a little bit. It hasn't quite worked out. But he feels that they can do it. He's got a large force, 16,000 troops, good troops, not, they are battle tested, most of them. But he has never commanded infantry. On the other side, you've got Samuel Curtis, who, when you look at this battle and realize, really through the war, you think about the savior of Missouri for the Union, I'd have to say Samuel Curtis. He gets lost with U.S. Grant, Sherman, Sheridan, all these guys. But Curtis maintains Missouri for the Union. He keeps it. After this battle, it's 2 years before anything else really happens in that area because of him. And unfortunately for him, he will die the year after the war ends, 1866. But Curtis he's a very bright man. He's very not so much offensive minded, but he knows what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, and how he wants to do it.
Methodical.
He's very methodical. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Very methodical, and he sets up a great position. The Confederates, by this time, we have the Battle of Wilson's Creek, 61. They've now been pushed up into northern Arkansas. And the Confederates are sitting in a place called the Boston Mountains, and that's where Van Doren's going to come up and take over the army. Meanwhile, the Union Army has pulled back. They are in a place called Bentonville, and they will pull all the way back toward Pea Ridge or Elkhorn Tavern. And they're going to set up a defensive area along Little Sugar Creek. Little Sugar Creek is an amazing defensive area. They have earthworks. Curtis has good infantry there. He's got artillery, and he's got a good set of generals too, including Franz Siegel. And you're actually going to hear me praise Franz Siegel in this. I know it's shocking. Siegel doesn't get a lot of praise in the Civil War. In this one, he's going to get some praise. This is probably the only battle where he actually does some amazing work. But we'll talk about why he does amazing work here in a bit. So you've got a good Union position here. They're protecting Missouri. They know what the Confederates want to do. They just don't know when they're going to do it. And Curtis knows, Van Doren's got a lot of troops. But it's still kind of nasty out there. Is he going to move at this particular point in time? It's not 100%. So when he sets up, his initial defensive line, he's going to have some units pushed out toward Bentonville and things like that, including Siegel. This battle, really, when you look at it, it says March 7th and 8th. Technically, it really starts on the 6th. There is a small battle at Bentonville as the Confederates have started to move out. The Confederates, they move out of the Boston Mountains, and it's the whole force, 16,000 men. They're going to be joined by Albert Pike with some Cherokee companies, Regiment of Cherokee. That's actually really, I think it comes down to it's really 2 brigades.
The 2nd Mounted Cherokee.
First and 2nd Mounted Cherokee rifles, yep. Stan, I don't know if you say Waite or Waity. He's the last Confederate general to surrender in the Civil War. But he's a colonel at this time. Pike is a guy who's went out to the Indian Territory. He has negotiated with 5 different tribes, and he has gotten them to, side with the Confederacy, side with Richmond. And the assumption is that they won't have to leave Indian Territory,
which is like modern day Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma and all that. They won't have to leave there to fight. However, they are going to leave that area. Not a lot of them, but they're going to leave that area. The Cherokees are going to come out, and they're going to fight in the Battle of Pea Ridge. That's our first battle where the Native Americans are involved in the Civil War.
And a large part of why they even considered leaving their territory, wasn't it because they were promised back pay?
Yeah, back pay, a little bit of expansion. There's a lot of different things that were I'm sure told to them at the time. So they're going to be joined by these guys. And now that's a whole different element of men that are going to be coming in. And they're not going to be armed with the modern day stuff. They're going to have like shotguns and rifles and stuff like that. Many of the Confederates are not going to be armed with the best stuff. But as Van Doren begins to advance, he's going to get, his dander's going to get up. He's going to get excited because he thinks he can drive all the way to St. Louis. He's not going to take enough rations. His wagons, he's going to get bogged down quite a bit. It's going to snow. It's going to rain. It's cold. It's a terrible place to be marching toward. But his goal is to get around the right flank of the Union Army and come in behind and destroy them.
So he's, to set it up for people too, he's not entirely moving. So he's what would you say, southwest, south?
He's a little more southwest
of the Federal position. Mm-hmm. And to get to St. Louis, he has to go through the Federals in a way, either around, through, and front. Yeah. And the way the Federals are set up, you said along, what was the creek?
Little Sugar Creek.
Little Sugar Creek. That creek runs west to east, or, runs, across west to east. And Pea Ridge is, geographic feature of this landscape of these mountains, and runs parallel with Little Sugar Creek as well, on the north side of Little Sugar Creek. So when Aaron said they were all entrenched in and everything, they were entrenched in facing south, facing the direction the Confederates, you assume, would advance and attack from. The Confederates don't have that, they're thinking a little bit outside the box in their route to St. Louis. So continue there.
Yeah, once they have some, so Curtis at this time doesn't know that Van Dorn is on the move. Van Dorn has left. He is on the way. He's pushing his troops hard. Like I said, it's cold. They don't have much food. He's not allowing them to make fires. When he does allow them to make fires, it's for a ruse. So these guys, they're tired, they're worn out, and Van Dorn keeps pressing them. Van Dorn was a cavalry guy, so he's used to long rides and things like that. On top of that, he's sick during this time, so he's riding in an ambulance most of the time. Not that that's an easy ride, especially in Civil War times, but it's a lot easier than marching from the Boston Mountains up into the Ozarks. That's not in the middle of winter. Not a fun time. And it almost seems that he kind of fails to see these men are suffering. He's going to push them very, very hard with very little to go on. But these guys, they're gonna go. Even with desertion and things like that, and there's accounts of men just falling by the wayside, and they're not deserting; they just physically cannot go any farther. Van Dorn's going to keep going. They'll run into a little bit of opposition there at Bentonville, and this is where Sigel really comes in. Sigel is out there. He's warned by Curtis that, hey, the Confederate Army might be moving toward you. Come back here to Little Sugar Creek. Come back here and get in our defensive line. We got a good defensive line. So Sigel starts that way, right? Sigel then will take, basically he'll make a little mini army out of some units. He'll have some artillery, some cavalry, and the infantry. And he's going to go back and he's going to set up there at Bentonville. Instead of going with the rest of his army, he's going to stay there. Now, whether this is for glory purposes or what, honestly, knowing Sigel, it's because they're retreating and he's good at retreat. So he's going to stay with the rear guard. He's going to fight a little sharp battle there at Bentonville. And they're along the Bentonville Turnpike. And that's going to slow the Confederates up a little bit. But, when Van Dorn gets there, they've already left. All Sigel was doing was protecting his rear, getting the rear of his army out of there so that they could go and march and get up here to Little Sugar Creek Valley. And as he does that, when Van Dorn actually says he gets there, and he could have almost begged the Federals. Well, it's not possible. He gets there hours after the Federals have already left. It's the cavalry that actually gets there first. But as things go in war, sometimes they get a little exaggerated. When Van Dorn gets there, the Federals are already gone. But they're going to retreat and go back to this defensive line. And Van Dorn's going to come up with a pretty good plan. He is going to march his men. There's a big mountain there. Literally, that's what it's called, Big Mountain. And it's kind of in front of the Elkhorn Tavern, Pea Ridge area, in front of the defensive line. And the Confederates are going to try to go around that on a couple different roads. And they're going to try, as I said, go around that right flank of the Union Army. When they do that, they're going to go down two separate roads, and he's going to split his army. This is the only time that Sterling Price and Ben McCulloch will actually agree on something. However, Van Dorn wants to start right away because they just had that skirmish at Bentonville. He wants to start right away. McCulloch is like, let the guys rest. They've been marching. They're worn out. This is crazy. And this is March 6th, right around there, getting into March 7th. But Van Dorn doesn't want to hear any of it. Do you have something, Jack? Sorry. He doesn't want to hear any of it, and he's pressing on. So they make this plan to go around Big Mountain. And the first, really, we can split Pea Ridge up into two separate battles. Yeah. 2 days of battle. Really, technically, I guess you could go 3 battles because you have a battle at Elkhorn Tavern, a battle at Leestown on the first day, and then you have the Battle of Elkhorn Tavern just there
on the
8th. So we'll start with Leetown. That is where he is going to send McCulloch and McIntosh around. As I said, McCulloch, he's a famous guy, Texas Ranger, all that. I think I said it earlier, he does not like to wear a uniform. On this particular day, he is wearing a black velvet coat and some really nice boots and a hat and a gold watch. He looks good, That's going to be something of his downfall, though. And this other guy, McIntosh, that he has, who's a general, he's also a war veteran. When both of these guys are stubborn, they're set in their ways, and that is ultimately going to hurt the Confederacy in this battle. When this attack starts at Leetown, it's kind of a surprise. Earlier in the morning, Samuel Curtis has been notified that there's movement. It sounds like artillery movement and things. He actually ignores that. He says, I don't think, they're not going to come around that way. He's still expecting them to hit at Little Sugar Creek. And that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that those sounds they're hearing are Earl Van Doren's men moving across their front. Now, when that happens, they're going to get on the Bentonville detour around the ridge and take the Telegraph Road south. I'm sorry, that is Price that's going to be doing that. So when he splits, Price is going to be coming down the Telegraph Road. The whole idea is to go around Big Mountain and link up in the rear of the Federal Army and be able to put his army back together. And then he's completely in the rear of Curtis, but in a way, Curtis is in his rear too. So the Federals hear this, but Curtis doesn't bite completely on it. What ends up happening is the next morning he starts hearing fire down at Leetown to his south, and he's trying, on that right flank, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's hearing all that, and then he will hear firing up at Elkhorn Tavern, and so an emergency is going to start happening. And rather than just give up, he's outnumbered. He's going to start trying to shift units wherever he can to just hold the Confederates back. And the Confederates are going to be somewhat successful. They are going to push hard on that Leetown Road area. That part of the battle, that's the bigger part of the battlefield on March 7th. Yeah, that particular spot, when they get around that particular area, Big Mountain, they're going to have a good offensive area for the Confederates. You're going to have they're going to be stretched out along a lane. There's artillery fire going back and forth, but they're steadily pushing the Union Army back, even as some reinforcements are coming up. Herbert, who is under the command of McIntosh and McCulloch, is going to be on your far left. So he'll be facing that right flank in, I believe it's Morse Woods. He's going to be placed out there, and we'll get back to him in a minute. But he's going to be in command of the 4th Arkansas, 3rd Louisiana, 14th, and 15th Arkansas. And he's going to have the 3rd Texas Cavalry with him. But he's going to be out on the left side, or the west side, I guess. Actually, it might be north side.
East side?
Oriented.
Yeah. Got to get oriented again because the Confederates are attacking from the north. So east side of Leetown Road is going to be, so the Confederate left will be Herbert. On the far right, you'll have the 16th Arkansas with McCulloch will be down there with them. Now as they're marching, they're going to start getting some Federal artillery thrown onto them. And that's what's going to cause them to deploy into this field, and they're going to push, they're going to start the fight at Foster's Farm, and they're going to push the Federals all the way back to Oberson's Field, which is back toward the Pea Ridge area. And there's a place called Round Prairie there. During this fight, McCulloch is going to decide he needs to see what's going on. He's, again, Texas Ranger. This is
yeah.
a dude that's been scouting all his life, right?
He knows what to do.
He knows what to do. Yeah. He's going to get out in front of the 16th Arkansas, and he is immediately going to be shot by some Missourians that are on a skirmish line. Excuse me. Those and Missouri and Illinois troops, they are going to kill McCulloch, but the Confederates don't know that. Because of the thick brush that they're in at that particular moment, the 16th Arkansas, who were only yards away, don't see McCulloch get killed. As a matter of fact, when they march forward, McCulloch says to bring up skirmishers, 2 companies of skirmishers, and then the rest of the 16th follow behind them once they make engagement. Those skirmishers will walk right over McCulloch and not see him.
Wow.
The skirmishers will engage each other, and then the rest of the 16th Arkansas will come up. There will be a sharp fight before, and they will find McCulloch's body. Before that happens, though, as those skirmishers had been going back and forth, they're going to fall back a little bit. The Federals are going to go, and they're going to find McCulloch's body, and they're going to take his gold watch and his sword. They're going to try to take his boots. But then the rest of the 16th Arkansas comes up, and that doesn't happen. So when he is discovered, he's still got his boots on and his jacket and stuff, but his gun, he had a rifle that he wore on his. I mean, this dude is literally a mountain man. He's got a rifle he wears on his back. He is not your typical general looking at. So when he's killed, command of this particular part of the battlefield is going to fall under James McIntosh. And he is aware, they kind of try to keep McCulloch's death quiet because he's a very well-liked man. The troops respect him. He is the winner of Wilson's Creek. So they don't want to cause panic. So quietly, McIntosh is told, "You're in command." McIntosh, for some weird reason, decides to take it upon himself to lead some Arkansas troops. I believe it's going to be the 2nd Arkansas Mounted Rifles. That's his old unit.
He wants to take the lead.
He's going to take the lead, lead them to glory, right? McIntosh is going to be killed not far from where McCulloch's killed.
Yeah, maybe 200 yards.
Something like that.
East of
now, everybody sees him fall.
Yeah.
Okay? So this attack that the Confederates are doing, well, it's a good attack. Their leaders are dropping like crazy, and the Federals are holding. Command of this area is going to fall on poor Mr. Herbert here. Now, Herbert, again, he's over in the woods. He does not know what's happening. The original plan was for the entire Confederate Army to advance together.
Once the attack began. So he hears some shooting.
So he's heard that. He starts advancing.
Through the woods.
Yeah. He does not know about anything else. Now, here's the problem. No one else knew to advance. McIntosh is killed. McCulloch's killed. The staff are running around like chickens with a head cut off. Nobody knows what's going on. And poor old Herbert's over here advancing. And he still has a chance. At this point, once those 2 guys are killed, this day now becomes more of a Union victory on this end because they're going to hold. He will get in there, and Herbert though still has a chance. If he could come around and hit that flank and drive the Yankees off, or find out that he's in command and order the full attack, the Confederates can overwhelm them, but no one can find him. Because he's out in the woods.
Yeah.
Not any fault of his own. He's where he was supposed to be. So the Confederate, it's a what if. But the Confederate attack's going to falter because you have McCulloch and McIntosh that are killed, and Herbert doesn't know that they're dead. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know where the other troops are. The other troops are going to be stationary back here around Foster's Farm. During this time as well, there's going to be some lulls in the battle throughout that day. Kind of a cool thing, the indirect fire of the Union artillery. At one point, they're going to have these howitzers set up, and I think it's Welfley. Welfley is his name, I believe. He's over there in Oberson's field. He's just going to start launching shells. They can't see anything. Yeah. They're just shooting over this belt of trees, right? but they're doing a good job. They're hitting the infantry. They're hitting the stuff, the guys that are still out on the road. And McCulloch, for some reason, didn't think his artillery would be completely needed. So he's actually got 12 guns sitting on the pike still. They're not even unlimbered. He's got a little bit of artillery responding to that. But, yeah, the Federals are, they're starting to use this indirect fire, just launching shells whenever they got a chance, because it's just something. As it got quiet, they don't know what's happening. They don't know if the Confederates are moving around them or whatever. Man, let's just start shooting and see what happens. They'll see a contingent of Confederate officers come up on a ridge, and they'll turn their fire on that. 2 guns will start shooting up there and drive them off. But during that time, the next real phase of that is going to be trying to is Herbert moving up through. Men of the 17th Arkansas and the 16th Arkansas are over in this belt of trees, and they're by a guy, they're opposite of a guy named Osterhaus and Gruzel. I don't know if that's how you say his name or not. Well, Osterhaus is an overall command. He's got Gruzel or Grizel, his troops. He's got the 12th Missouri, 36th Illinois, 22nd Indiana. And he's got a guy named Busey who's got the cavalry. Busey's been pushed back. He's the one that was pushed back off of Foster's Farm. He's now kind of on the flank, a little disorganized. And this gap is open in the trees. There's still a chance on that Confederate, if we're looking at just the Leetown map, on the Confederate right, Union left, there's still a chance had they pressed through. What's going to happen is some of the cavalry is going to go up through there. And one of the Confederate horsemen, his name is Ross. He's with the Texas Cavalry, 6th Texas, Major Ross. I love what he says here. I think this is one of the funnest things that gets said, because as the Confederates are pushing, this is when that the infantry that's been being called for, is going to finally start arriving. During this whole time with the cavalry and with the little units that Osterhaus had down here, he's been calling for reinforcements. And finally, those reinforcements are going to get there. Well, they're going to line up in a nice line of battle. So Ross, he's going to get out and he's going to come up through the gap of trees there, right? And when he comes up, this is what he says. He's going to consider his options. There's going to be a Federal battery, and this is probably Wellesley's guns, are going to start sending shot and shell screeching over their heads. And Ross is going to decide to turn his battalion around and head back through the gap to safety. He's going to go back to the Confederate lines. Now I think this is one of the greatest quotes. He tells a friend, "I did not run. I walked very fast." Okay? So he knew what was going on. He knew, I got to get out of there. And really this fight at Leetown is going to come to an end with the Confederates being blocked. They're not able to make that conjunction with Price's troops and with Van Doren, who are up on the other road on the other side of Big Mountain. They're not able to get all the way up through there. And the Confederates are going to suffer for that. They've lost two commanders. The other commander doesn't know what's going on. It's confusion down there. So once that's secure, Curtis is now going to turn his attention to Elkhorn Tavern. Elkhorn Tavern is where all their supplies and things are. It's not it's not heavily defended. He's got his I guess his general's guard or whatever is going to be out there. He's going to send some reinforcements out that way, but these guys are going to be in one heck of a fight. They're going to be fighting Earl Van Doren and Sterling Price, and again, outnumbered, but they're in a consolidated good line. They're able to hold long enough, and the Confederates really almost get completely around them. But they're able to hold off long enough to keep the Confederates at bay. Strong artillery fire, reinforcements being called in. The battle is just devastating in this area.
Quick question.
Yes,
Looking at the map here at Elkhorn Tavern, and we're looking at the Confederate lines of battle. What would be the western flank of the Confederate, I guess, cavalry here? Is that Tom Rosser of the Valley?
I don't think so. I think it's
Different
a different
Rosser?
Rosser. Yeah.
I was going to say, because that's
I think that's a different Rosser.
a common theme we see here is early in the war. Some of these folks are starting out west.
Siegel's out here.
Yeah, and then making their way back
I think
home.
that's a different Rosser. And that should be infantry, actually. Yeah, that's an infantry.
That's infantry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, cavalry units are going to be generally like that.
Gotcha.
With the split.
I think you're looking at the other map, Elijah.
Uh-oh.
You're looking at the 8th.
And that's the 7th.
Oh, on the 8th there. Yeah, I see that. I see what you're looking at.
How do you see Never mind.
He's up here.
There.
So yeah, but the Confederates, they're going to push hard, and there's going to you have this massive fight down at Leetown. Now you've got a massive fight at Elkhorn Tavern. It just shifts, to this particular spot, but the results are basically going to be the same. Now you don't have the generals dying so much there, but you are going to have a large attack. Now, before I move too far into this, there's one thing I forgot to mention, and that had to do with the fight at Leetown. We talked about the Native Americans coming in, and those guys are going to be part of the Confederates. Are going to take the artillery there in Foster's Field, Foster's Farm. When they do, they're capturing guns and stuff. It's great for them. The Indians, the Native Americans, are going to come in. They're going to hoop and holler and charge in as well. Well,
Kind of causes a little confusion.
it causes some confusion. On top of it, so while Pike is an authority figure to them, they're not so disciplined. These guys, again, they're going in, they're just shooting their guns off, whatever, hooping and hollering, running back and forth. It causes utter confusion. They will even get down and mutilate some of the bodies.
The wounded, they'll scalp the wounded.
Scalp the wounded. There's at least 8 that get scalped. Of course, it will be denied. But there are several men that I believe it's really the 3rd Illinois, or 3rd Iowa, I think, that 3rd Iowa that will actually be the sufferers of that. And they will make it back. Now, there's an interesting story. We talk about Siegel. Siegel is going to end up down here a little bit later, and the 3rd Iowa they're hightailing it. One of their commanders has been killed, and they are going to take the entire unit to escort his body back behind the lines to Elkhorn Tavern. They're trying to get out of Dodge. They just went through this whole ordeal with the Native Americans, got overrun and all this. They're trying to get out of Dodge. Siegel will see that and go, whoa. No.
What do you think you're doing?
Turn around. Yeah. Like 2 guys can take that back. The rest of you come back here, and he'll put them back in the line.
Yeah.
He's going to shore up that side of the battle line for a little while. And I think that's just amazing with what we know about Siegel. He's not a great general, but in this battle, he's on point for a good bit of it. He's also going to do his normal Siegel things. He should have been here well before he gets here. He marches and counter marches. He goes back into camp to get his guys food, and then he comes back. Does a whole lot of things that he shouldn't have done. But that's Siegel. Curtis actually will have conversations with all his generals, but he has individual conversations with Siegel because Siegel still thinks he's kind of in command, and Curtis needs to make sure he understands what's going on. So there's a whole little story there with those guys. But yes, at Elkhorn Tavern, after that Leestown side is secure, at Elkhorn Tavern, they're going to hold the Confederates at bay. They're going to fall back, but they're going to be able to really keep the Confederates from getting completely around them. And that night, after the fighting has basically died down, they're still skirmishing back and forth and things like that. You're going to have a council of war. Curtis is going to call this council of war, meeting of his generals. Now, to me, reading this, Curtis has already made up his mind, but he wants to see what his guys think. They're going to get there, and they're going to be kind of split. He's going to say, do we fight or do we retreat? We've got a good position here. Consolidate our line and fight them, or do we get out of here? Let them have Missouri. So some of them go, yeah, let's fight. Of course, Siegel being one of them goes, yeah, maybe we should get out of here. Siegel, for some reason, will be under the impression that they will be in a retreat on March 8th. Curtis determines to fight. He feels like with the attacks the day before, his army has performed well. They've been able to hold off 2 major attacks at 2 different spots. Now he's going to consolidate those troops. He knows Van Doren's worn out. They just marched from the Boston Mountains through the winter weather all the way up here. And he hasn't really had to march anywhere. His troops are in good shape. So he's going to determine to fight. What ends up happening is that is going to be the decisive part of this battle. That, we talked about the Native Americans down at Leetown. After that, some artillery is going to be fired in later. They're gone. They hightail it. They're out of there. So now they've just lost those 2 brigades. You've got, the Confederates are hungry. They're tired. And Van Doren's going to have some other issues. He decided to keep his wagons, including his artillery train, back at Bentonville. They're not close. They're like,
which is at this point
like 13 miles, I think.
Between, because the Confederates have went around. It's now between the Federals are between them and their
supply.
Yeah.
And so Curtis is in the middle of the night. He's pulling his units back. He's consolidating this. Van Doren doesn't order up any ammunition or any replenishing of ammunition. He doesn't order up the wagons. Nothing. He leaves them where they're at. Well, guess what? His artillery doesn't have any ammo. So his guns are useless. I mean, they're going to have some shots, but there's not going to be a way for them to counter what's about to happen on the 8th. They have a bunch of Confederate artillery in reserve because they will take Elkhorn Tavern. They will actually push the Federals all the way back, excuse me, toward, I believe it's Pratt's Store.
Yeah, their battle line, the Confederate battle line on the 7th, just totally extends and expands far beyond what the Federal battle line is around Elkhorn Tavern. They don't expect them to attack really because that Telegraph Road, the terrain on that road as they're coming in south towards Elkhorn Tavern, I mean, it's the heights around them is like 300 feet up, and the Federals are just looking down at them. The Confederates don't know what's above them, above their heads. So, the Confederate leader, he decides Van Doren, he'll slowly but surely expand his line like an accordion over the ridges, up and down these hollows, and expand the line, which just can eat the Federal line in a way.
Yeah.
But the Federals choose to stay.
Yeah. I mean, his plan is not bad. Logistically, it's not good. He doesn't have the food. He doesn't have the ammo, things like that. And, kudos to Curtis for not being one of our early Eastern generals and retreating. He decides to fight. That next day, he is going to lead a counterattack. The Federal cannoneers are silenced. They're going to quickly silence, destroy, and force the rebels into retreat. And I'll go back to this again. In the process of everything that Van Doren's doing, reconcentrating his army and everything, he forgot to bring up the supply trains. Most of the rebels did not get food or new ammunition. That mistake is fatal. Yeah. That's the fatal mistake. Even with the death of your two major generals that are there, Herbert by this time obviously knows he's in command now. He's a capable guy. You can't fight on an empty armies move on their stomachs. You can't fight on that and not have ammo. It's just not going to work. So Curtis prepares for an attack with his entire army. And this is what I love about this battle. This is the one time that you are going to see an entire army advance. There are accounts of these guys lining up in the fields to attack the Confederates, and it's just a long line. I mean, cavalry, artillery, infantry, everybody's going. We're not holding back. And, I mean, that's pretty impressive, especially early in the war like this. But this is, and it may be the only time, it's the only time I know of that an entire army advances at once in a battle. But Curtis is going to prepare to attack with the entire army of the Southwest. Van Doren's going to start to realize now, oh crap, my supply trains are still down in Bentonville. And he now realizes I'm in danger. You know, I always think about this. Was it Little Simpsons guy? I'm in danger. That's kind of how Van Doren was at that point. Oh crap, they're coming. And in all of this though, somehow Sigel thinks they're retreating. I don't know how that happens, but Sigel fights well in retreat. He will actually get up on a hillside and he'll line up cannons and he'll command these cannons, and they're just barraging the Confederates. And the whole time, Sigel thinks he is protecting the rear of the army when the whole army is advancing. Don't know how he got that confused, but that's our boy Sigel.
Missed the memo there.
And he fights well. Sigel does a great job at this. So apparently, what didn't happen in that memo was no one told him, even up into 1864, fight as if you're retreating, because he would have been the next Grant.
We'll talk about that in May.
Yeah. So Sigel, he's performing amazingly. All of Curtis's guys are performing great, and because of all of this going on, Van Doren is going to realize I can't compete right now. His guys are exhausted. He's got no ammo, no food, and now he's got an entire army marching on him. They are going to start to retreat. They're going to move east toward Huntsville, which is in Madison County, and that's basically going to end the Battle of Pea Ridge. It is the bloodiest battle west of the Mississippi. The Confederates are going to suffer. They're the attacking. They're going to suffer about 2,000 casualties. There's going to be 1,384 for the Union. So, 3,384 casualties during this battle. But this battle changes the strategic outlook in the Trans-Mississippi. Van Doren is going to get so demoralized that he's going to take the Army of the West all the way down to the eastern bank of Mississippi and leave Arkansas completely defenseless. He thinks he's doing something. I don't know what exactly he thinks. But the Union victory here at Pea Ridge is so going to secure Missouri for the Union until 1864. And we look back at some of the guys that really were involved in this. These guys are going to hold Missouri for quite a while. Some of the Federals you didn't mention, Greenville Dodge, that's a cool name. He's the 4th Iowa Colonel. He is instrumental in holding Leetown. Without Dodge, you don't really have a lot of good happening down at Leetown and up at Elkhorn Tavern. You got Jefferson C. Davis.
No relation.
There's a cool little story about him, but that'll be a different podcast. Again, Gruzel, Osterhaus, Busey or Bussey, not Gary Busey, so no one knows. You've got all these guys. There's so many characters in this battle, and the initial rebel attack is successful. It just can't be followed up. And it's
one of those big what ifs.
If
they had the supplies, if they had
the disaster of McCulloch being killed because he wanted to reconnoiter himself. The disaster of McIntosh being killed because he wanted to lead into glory.
Some Jackson-esque things.
And, the Confederates had huge advantage in numbers, but no leaders. That's really what it gets down to. And the Union, less leaders, or less troops, but better leaders. As I said earlier, we look at that Leetown fight. Really, yes, the next day, March 8th, is the definitive end of the battle. But really, that fight at Leetown is probably the most hard fought during that battle. That is where...
And that fight wasn't even supposed to happen, was it?
Yeah,
at
it wasn't supposed to happen. Nope.
It's kind of accidental.
It was an accidental fight, and that's where you're losing McCulloch and McIntosh. The attack, that's the uncoordinated, unsupported attack because nothing gets passed down. Your leadership breaks down. They're going to run into those woods. And just as they seem to make progress, that's when, Jefferson C. Davis, arrives and blunts the assault. Poor old Herbert, he gets lost in the woods. He doesn't know what's going on. It just goes to crap for him. And then,
It's crazy to think that someone got lost in the woods when you could just go to the sound of gunfire and find your way.
You would think.
Your way back. You
would think, except that this is terrain they've never been on. They don't know the terrain as well as it hoped. And, thinking about just from our own experience of being at Living Histories and things, how even though you can hear that gunfire,
could be distorted.
And it's so distorted. I remember we were in Newmarket setting up for an event, and there was some artillery fire across the interstate, loud interstate. And, that artillery fire sounded like it was right next to us. In the musket fire, too. It was almost like we could hear the commands. Jack, I know you remember that. We were there at that witness tree. And that was, one, for historians, it was amazing. We were like, oh, this is cool. But thinking about the soldiers, if I had to figure out exactly where, I could be like, well, it's coming from my right. That's about all I can tell you.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you where at on the right. I thought they were right next to us. There's a whole interstate between us.
And you run the chance of following the sound of gunfire, ending up in the enemy lines, and then you're...
Exactly.
And you're really screwed.
Exactly. And then you move from that Leetown fight, you move up, in the morning around 10:30. That's when Curtis becomes aware of those large Confederate numbers, and he's going to send Carr's 4th Division up there against Price and his superior infantry. And then the Confederates will push them, at Elkhorn Tavern. They'll take them all the way to Riddick's cornfield. And that's where Price will try a flank movement, and that's where our guy, Greenville Dodge of the 4th Iowa, is going to come up and be like, not today. There's just so many characters in this battle. There's so many different men that perform individually well for the Union Army, especially, that just make this such an interesting battle. And then the next day on the 8th, it's basically becomes a Union victory because you have no leadership and you have no supply.
Yeah.
You have to hightail it out of there. And they do. This will end up, like I said, the Union emphasis is going to switch from capturing, with Missouri and St. Louis secure, the Union emphasis is going to switch to capturing the rest of the Mississippi River Valley. We just had this, right? Right before this, Fort Donelson, Fort Henry fall. This opens up such a wide area in the West. This is a major, major setback for what's happening in the Civil War. In the West, the Union is winning. Yeah. In the East, not so much. You have some movement, but really, that's why I hate to say this, not to
say it,
not just to go onto the valley, but that's what makes the Shenandoah Valley so important in 1862, because that is your light. If you're the Confederates, that's your light in all this darkness that's happening.
Yeah,
that Valley campaign is what's going to save you, and gives you hope. So shout out to the Shenandoah Valley. But this battle is just, It's absolutely amazing. I've never been here. I want to go here.
Yeah, we've got 4,300 acre Battlefield Park, and it's a national park, national military park, one of the few military parks, part of the park system. So there's tons of preserved land there. The battlefield is really, well done in its interpretation and accessibility. Tons of miles of walking trails and hiking trails and biking trails. The restoration of the battlefield is done very accurately with a lot of the fields we talked about, Oberson's Field, the Foster Farm, things like that, with period fencing, the roadways being restored, being able to get from one side of the battlefield to the other within the park. The fence lines talked about with Elkhorn Tavern and that all being restored, as well as the what could have been of the entrenchments at Little Sugar Creek. Those are accessible and interpreted as well, so you can get to some of those portions of the fighting of what could have been. But yeah, we were plugging in the GPS before we clicked record on, if we left now, how soon could we get there? It'd take us about 16 hours.
16, 17 hours, yeah.
To get from the valley to...
That's without bathroom breaks or anything.
To get out there, and I assume this is semi-close to probably a couple hours south of Wilson's Creek in Missouri.
It's about 3 miles south of the Missouri border.
Yeah, it's really close to the Missouri border. So it's one to check out if you haven't. I know we really want to go check it out. But yeah, it's one of those landscapes that is easy to understand and interpret, both looking at a map, looking at an interpretive sign, but standing there and viewing it for yourself. So any other thoughts for the episode?
Well, one thing I want to read here that I think is this is telling for the Confederates at least. In most of the battles that we study and we read about, the Confederates are outnumbered. This is one of the few where they're not. It says the rebel army of the West had 16,000 men available for the upcoming struggle, while the Federal Army of the Southwest had 10,250 men. The Confederates had advantages in men, and their artillery was relative to the opponent's artillery, greater than any other Confederate force in a single campaign during the American Civil War.
Wow.
And they flubbed it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Kudos to the Federals and Curtis. Reading, and I'll give the book recommendation if you want. The best book I've found on Pea Ridge is Pea Ridge, Civil War Campaign in the West by William L. Shea and Earl J. Hess. Chocked with a ton of information. Great description of the battle. I've read this book, I think, 3 times. Just because I like the battle and I really enjoy the way Hess and Shea write this. There's just so many things, as we find with a lot of battles. There's so many neat things. I mean, you have the Native Americans in this one on top of it. That's just a whole nother.
One thing to go off of that. Good article by the American Battlefield Trust on this as well. The Cherokee, when they end up attacking the Union guns and everything, and they're hooting and hollering and adding to the chaos of that conflict. Apparently, there was an instance where they were scalping some Union troops.
Yeah.
I think who was it? Was it Pike that had actually faced the consequences of that? Got tried for war crimes.
He got tried for war
atrocities, as they called it, being responsible for them scalping some Union troops, and I think there was a Union account of that as well, saying something to the extent of hoping he sees every last one of the Native American population killed because of that, just because of how barbaric they saw it. And it was even interesting too. The fellow Confederate troops that weren't of Cherokee descent that watched that happen were just as appalled as the Union troops to see these soldiers getting scalped in battle. Like, that was just one thing, I guess, from an American point of view, that was just taboo on the battlefield, but these Native Americans were just having at it.
Yeah, and I mean, we look at it and go, oh my God, but that's part of how they fought war.
Yeah.
That was a prize. And, they decided to side with the Confederacy. And there were Cherokees, and we kind of forget about it. The Native Americans were split too. We had some Cherokee nations going with the Confederacy. We had some of the Cherokee Nation went with the Union. When we talk about the Civil War being brother against brother, family member against family member, it even includes the Native Americans in that. Like, literally, these guys are against each other and trying to...
Because there's the first Cherokee mounted rifles, U.S. and CS.
And CS, yeah.
Both regiments.
Yeah, so very interesting battle. Very, very cool battle, honestly. And definitely want to go. Again, I'm sad this is not a battlefield I've been to. Yeah. Of all the places I've been to, this is one I haven't got to go to.
We'll make it happen.
It's happening.
We'll go.
The Battlefields and Bourbon
right now.
World Tour.
We're leaving right now.
Yeah, as soon as we're done recording, we're heading out.
Full at work now.
Yeah. Alrighty, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening. This was a fun to do. I appreciate Aaron for coming on and preaching some more about Western theater things and bringing some light to it. We will. We'll catch you all on the next one. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to hit like and share with your friends and family, and let us know if you have any recommendations, both for bourbon and battle topics, or just Civil War topics in general. So, thank you all for listening.
Thanks, guys.